Welcome to Education Today, the guest teacher edition. I'm your host, Solanke. After 15 years as a secondary English teacher, I stepped away from the classroom and took a 1-year hiatus. Now I'm back in a completely new capacity. I'm a substitute teacher, and I get to experience teaching all grade levels and subjects from kindergarten to 12th grade. Join me as I document my journey, seeing education through a brand new lens and a different angle. Welcome back to Guest Teacher. I am your host, solanke, and I'm going to tell you about what happened this week in my journeys in substitute teaching. I heard a student use ChatGPT, use the phrase or the word ChatGPT as a verb. He said, in reference to an assignment, he told another student, "Oh, don't worry about that. I'm just going to ChatGPT it." I said, "What?" I said, "When did ChatGPT become a verb? When did y'all change it to a verb? And why are y'all blatantly cheating? Like, you don't even care that there's an adult around. You're just going to say that." I mean, I guess in his mind, I'm just a substitute. I wouldn't be surprised if that makes it to the dictionary in the next few years. Not necessarily as a verb, but as a noun, perhaps. ChatGPT. Lordy, lordy, lordy. The more I substitute teach, the more I realize I don't want to be back in the classroom fighting those battles with high school students about copying and cheating. But let me get off my soapbox. Okay, so I saw something really cool this week. I was in a classroom doing ESE push-in. I was the co-teacher, ESE co-teacher, as a substitute, and a teacher was talking, and as she was talking and she was showing some slides, subtitles were coming up on the screen where her slides were in Spanish. And I was like, what's happening? What's going on? Everything she was saying was being translated on the overhead screen for the students to see. And I was like, whoa, 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 pause. So I afterwards asked her, what is that? What program is that you're using? I've never seen anything like that in all my years of teaching. She said, it's just PowerPoint. I said, what? PowerPoint has that? It was PowerPoint. And I'm not sure if Microsoft Word Suite has that, but she was using PowerPoint. And she said the mic in her computer and her laptop is picking up her audio and translating it into the language that she's selected, which is Spanish. I don't know if they have other languages, but I'm guessing they probably do. And it was translating it on the screen for the students in Spanish. I was like, now that would have been a game changer for me. In all those years I was teaching ESOL, which is English as a second or other language. Oh my goodness, that's really cool. But it was an English class. So it brings me to my other point that I think I've mentioned before on this show, that in this particular county, even though there's a high Hispanic population, and not just Hispanic, I've interacted with students who Russian is their first language. But in my previous district, a student coming to schools in America with limited English proficiency would be placed in an ESOL English class and perhaps an ESOL reading class. So their English class would be different from the regular English class. It would be a class that is specifically for speakers of other languages who are not completely proficient in English. And we would teach them the same curriculum that we would teach the other kids. So if we were doing Romeo and Juliet with the other 9th graders, ESOL, we would also be doing Romeo and Juliet. But obviously it would be extremely differentiated to make it accessible to those who have limited English, perhaps using graphic novels, maybe translating some of the texts, and different strategies that we use for students who have limited English proficiency. And in their reading, in the ESOL reading class, if they had that class also, which depending on their proficiency, they may or may not, they would be learning the English that they need to be able to maneuver in life and in school, like the vocabulary that they need for science class, for example, or the vocabulary and the English skills that they need to apply for a job, that kind of thing. But in this district, that doesn't happen. They put the limited English proficiency, the ESOL students, the ESL students, in a regular English class with everybody else. And then the ESOL or ESL specialists push into those classrooms and assist those students, but not full time. They're not there all the time. They push into different classrooms and assist those students. They move on to the next classroom. Or in some schools, I've seen where they pull the students out of class and give them some one-on-one instruction or assistance. But they don't have a separate ESOL class, which is really strange to me, especially in a county that does have a high ESL population. So it can't even just be that, well, we don't have enough students to justify creating those classes. Those classes that exist in the state of Florida. So I'm not sure why they don't have that, but that's different. Yeah, but I love that program that PowerPoint seems to have where it will pick up your audio. And she was moving around as well. She said, even though I'm moving around the classroom, it's still picking up my audio as long as she didn't go too far from the laptop. But she was moving around. It was still picking up her audio. I thought that was really cool. I wish I had that when I was teaching ESOL, which I did for quite a few years. But even in classes where I was teaching regular English, but there were some kids who were considered proficient enough to be in regular English, but still, perhaps with my fast speech patterns, may struggle to pick up some of what's happening in the class. That would have been a game changer. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. All right, so let's talk about some stuff that I saw this week that not so good. So I spent quite a few days in a school this week that has what is called the Cambridge ACE program. And I guess because it's a middle school, it's Cambridge pre-ACE. So Cambridge is like coming from Cambridge University in the UK. And I think the middle school programs are supposed to be like the equivalent of our O-level/GCSEs in England, which is crazy because then that's what a high school diploma is, the equivalent of O-levels. So why are we bringing that here? But anyway, what do I know? And I guess the high school version of ACE classes would be similar in some ways to AP classes or dual enrollment in terms of they can give you college credit if you pass the class. I think it's passing the exam, not just the class. I think dual enrollment is passing the class. AP classes is you have to pass the exam to be able to get college credits and pass it with a certain proficiency. So I think it's similar to that. So this middle school has taken on this program, this Cambridge Pre-ACE program, so that these kids are in Cambridge Pre-ACE for math, science, English, and social studies. And some of the kids didn't even live in that area, and they had been kind of like a magnet program where their parents had selected that program. Some of them said that they'd been sent letters to their house inviting them, I guess, determined on their test scores, maybe perhaps, and their grades. And their parents had applied and they'd got into this program. So I was substituting for the majority of the week in a science class in this program with kids who were in what is being called a high school level class. And I could see from the roster that there were some gifted kids in there also. But a kid made a comment that kind of jarred me. And I'd been to the school before in different classes, not necessarily Cambridge ACE programs. I didn't really realize how this program was working. But a student made a comment about, "Miss, have you ever subbed downstairs?" And I was like, I think so. What's downstairs? It's the non-Cambridge kids. I said, excuse me, what? It's the non-Cambridge kids. Have you ever subbed downstairs? I don't think you'd like it. They're kind of, yeah. And I was like, whoa, 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 what are you talking about? And that's when I realized that the entire school is not using the Cambridge curriculum. It's certain kids who have applied and have been accepted into the program. And throughout the week, they were stressing about certain exams that they had. And they kept making this comment about how you can get kicked out of the program if you don't maintain certain grades. No pressure, 8th grade, right? No pressure there, 8th grade. But that made me realize from the comments the kids were making. And there was another kid who made another comment at some point during the week about how she was in the Cambridge ACE program for science, English, and social studies. But for math, she was in what she called boom boom math. She was downstairs for math. I'm downstairs for math. Yeah. Gen pop with the general population. So those comments made me realize that the district has created this supposedly great program, which is creating like a magnet for the school to like draw talent to that school. Perhaps and I'm not too sure about the history of this school, but I have an idea. I think they're trying to change the face of the school, not necessarily the face, the reputation of the school by creating this program and drawing certain clientele to this program. But what I realized from those comments was the district has, I'm not sure if it's intentionally or unintentionally, created something that I've seen before, which is almost like two schools within one. So you have a school within a school. So you have the regular school, and then you have the Cambridge kids who clearly from the comments were looking down their nose at the kids who are not in the Cambridge program. I have experienced this before. I have experienced a school that didn't actually even have a magnet program, but it was two schools in one, a school within a school. I worked at the school for a long time. They were neighborhood kids in the affluent middle class neighborhood the school was located in. And then there were kids who were bussed in from other parts of town that had a lower socioeconomic status. And one of the most jarring things I'd ever seen in that school was graduation when I first arrived. It has since changed. But when I first arrived to that school, graduation was such that if you were graduating with honors, you would wear a white robe. If you were graduating with I use air quotes, regular high school diploma, you would wear a blue robe. So at graduation, the kids who were graduating with honors in the white robes all sat together in a corner, and they went up first to get their diploma. And then Gen Pop in the blue robes went up to get theirs. From above, the aerial picture almost looks like how the American flag looks like, where you have the stars and the stripes in the top left corner, and then, the stars in the top left corner, and then the stripes for the other three quadrants of the rectangle. That's what graduation looked like, with the kids who were graduating with honors in the white robes in the upper left quadrant, like where the stars would be in the American flag, and then the blue robes, the majority. And it almost seemed like perhaps a quarter to 1/3, seemed more like a quarter though, of the graduating high school class those first couple of years I was there, were graduating with honors in white robes, and the majority were graduating in blue. But the problem was the kids graduating with honors in the white robes were overwhelmingly the neighborhood kids in the higher socioeconomic middle class neighborhood. They were sitting in that upper left quadrant in their white robes. And the kids who were graduating into a regular diploma in the blue robes were overwhelmingly the kids who were bussed in, who were also overwhelmingly our Black and brown students. It was a segregated graduation. Now, I'm not saying there were no Black or Hispanic kids in the white robes graduating with honors, but there were few. And overwhelmingly, the kids in the blue robes were Black and brown students. And it just looked like a segregated school. A few years later, that policy changed. I think there was this outrage from parents. I don't know how long it had gone on, but it was shameful. It was blatant and it was embarrassing. It was shameful. I remember when they were changing the policy, I had a student in my 10th grade class who, when asked to write an argument essay in the form of a letter to the principal, decided to write an argument essay about why she has worked so hard all of her school career since kindergarten, and she deserves to graduate in a white robe, and this is an outrage, and she's having her rights taken away from her, and go have a seat, sit down. The policy was changed after I've been there, I think maybe 2 years, and I think by like the third year that I was there, it was such that everybody wore a blue robe, and if you were graduating with honors, you had a white stole that said honors. Some of them also had NHS on it. But everybody wore a blue robe. And that was how it was the remainder of the time I was there. And I was there for 11 years. It was shameful. It was embarrassing. And I'm aware over the years that there were so many comments and complaints from parents in the community about, and to the school and to the district, about racial policies in that particular school. The minority teachers, we would have this joke. It's not really funny though. But we would just talk amongst ourselves about how you could tell, and everybody knew this, but it wasn't spoken, but we would speak amongst ourselves. Two things. Number one, when the schedules came out for what you're going to teach next year, if you were a Black teacher, your schedule was going to include regular classes, overwhelmingly perhaps. If you were a non-Black teacher, so white or Asian, Hispanic perhaps, your schedule was likely to include, you were more likely to get the AP classes, the honors classes, the electives, like, and the Black teachers were, as I've heard in many places, usually and often assigned the kids who would have behavior problems, the classes that would have more behavior problems, the classes that would have more struggling students. We were overwhelmingly assigned those classes. And we would make a joke. It's not funny, like as I said, that you could, from the time I arrived to that school to the time I left that school 11 years later, even though this situation I'm about to describe improved a lot, it still was such that what I'm about to say still held true by the time I left in 2022. And that is that you can walk into any classroom, especially any class call, let's say call classroom. So we're talking your English, your math, your social studies classes, and your science classes. And you could determine whether that class was honors or AP versus regular or intensive based upon who was sitting in that class. So if the students in that class were overwhelmingly white and few white and Asian, let me say, and then very few minorities, very few Black and Hispanic, then you knew that that was an honors or an AP class. And if you walked into a classroom and it was overwhelmingly Black and Hispanic and there were a few white kids, then you knew that that was a regular class or an intensive class. And that is not okay. That's not okay. It's shameful and it's blatant. People will say things like, well, you and your other colleagues, we were minority, the Black teachers there. We were minority. Well, you were there. You were there for over a decade. Why didn't you do something about it? Listen, it is not my job. First of all, do you know if I didn't try to make an impact, even if it's a small impact? Do you know if we didn't try to make change? Do you know if we weren't rejected, rebutted? You don't know what moves the Black teachers have tried to make over the years. But the thing is, it is not our responsibility. It's not my responsibility as one of the few Black teachers in the school to change that policy. I can make people aware of it, like the district and parents and stuff. It is the responsibility of the administration of that school and the district administration to do something about that policy and the way that that school was, where overwhelmingly the kids who were bused in from the poorer neighborhoods, who tend to be more Black and Hispanic, are in the lower level classes, and the neighborhood kids who tend to be overwhelmingly white, not completely, but overwhelmingly white, affluent. Those are the kids who are doing well in dual enrollment classes, AP classes, and honors classes, the white and the Asian students. Also, the students who have access to their parents taking them to community college to do dual enrollment classes because mom perhaps doesn't work and stays home while dad goes to work in a job that can support all of them. Or parents can afford to give the kid a car so the kid himself or herself can drive himself from campus to dual enrollment classes. But it is not the responsibility of the few Black people in an establishment to change racist policies. It is the job of the leadership of the establishment, district leadership, to make policies and change policies to affect change. So I reject that criticism that, well, you could have done something. Criticism is usually not coming from people who look like me, people who don't look like me, who are criticizing me. It is not my responsibility. My responsibility is to go in there and teach those kids and to make people aware of racist policies. But the district needs to change. As I said, I know over the years that parents complained, or many complaints. I remember one time we were tasked to do, for pre-planning, a sensitivity training, I guess you'd call it. I may have mentioned this before on this podcast. The loudest voices who complained about the sensitivity training were the most racist teachers, the most blatantly prejudiced teachers, the ones that students say, oh, this guy, he's always saying these kind of things. Not even just racist, just anti-everything. Comments about disabled people, comments about autistic kids, comments about people's race or religion. Those were the loudest vessels making noise when we were tasked to do sensitivity training, uh, cultural training during pre-planning. Interesting, but doesn't surprise me. But back to the school that has the Cambridge program. That school seems to be pretty diverse. I know that they're pulling kids from other parts of the district to come to that school. I thought the Cambridge classes were a decent mix of white students, Hispanic students, a few black students, not as many. But that I think that has a lot to do with that particular area the school is in. But then I was given one period of a science class that was not Cambridge, and I had to watch those kids for a period. Overwhelmingly Central American kids. That seemed odd. Now, I'm not saying there are no Central American kids in the Cambridge program, but they definitely are not a majority. But in this class that was non-Cambridge science, overwhelmingly Central American students. That did not sit right with me. Surely some of those kids could have been in that program. And English proficiency was not an issue with these students. I've experienced in my teaching years is that when a lot of kids from, say, these kids were mainly Mexicans, not what I'm used to, which is Honduran and Guatemalan. When a lot of kids from the same country or similar region are together in a class, that when they're conversing with each other, especially not about the classwork, that they speak in Spanish. That was not the case in this class. These kids were speaking to each other, not to me, but to each other in English. And that told me that English proficiency is not the reason that these kids are not in this Cambridge program. So, I don't know. I think that school needs to really look at itself and do a better job of diversifying who's in that Cambridge program and not just pulling from the other district, but look at actually who is in the catchment area of that school who has talent and potential, and make sure that you are diversifying who's in that program. Because it cannot be that the majority and this school does have a high Hispanic population. It cannot be that the majority of them do not qualify academically to be in that Cambridge program. And language is not the reason. As I said, they were speaking English to each other, which is interesting. Yeah. Let's do better. I spent some time in a school this week that has rotating schedules, meaning that Monday the schedule is first period, second period, third period, etc. Tuesday it starts from second period, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, first. Wednesday, third period is first, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, like that. It's confusing, but when I was thinking about it, I was thinking that about how teachers will say, "Oh, these kids in this class, they're so challenging," and another teacher will say, "Oh, they're good for me. They don't give me a problem." And you just feel like smacking them in the mouth. Okay, that's nice, but that does not help me. And I think that would negate a lot of that. Meaning, the kids behave differently at different times of the day. So if you have a class that's first period all the time, they're always lethargic, and it's hard getting them started. When you have them in the middle of the day, another day, or at the end of the day, another day in the week, you have a completely different class. And I noticed that this week because I was there a few days this week. It's a completely different class. If you have a class after lunch that's just off the chains, but then you have that class first period another day or last period another day, you have a different class because they're not all hyped up on sugar. And if you have a class last period of the day that's just like, oh my goodness, these kids are wild at the end of the day. But then the next day you have them first period, you have a different class. So you eliminate this situation of these kids are always lethargic, or these kids are always wild after lunch, or these kids are always try to put their head down last period, or they're wild last period. The only thing they did was they kept the middle of the day, fourth period as lunch, and that remains stable. So if you have a class for fourth period, you'll have them. That's how you'll have them throughout the week. But every other period changing, which to me was confusing, but I think it negates that. Oh, well, they're good for me. Okay, let's see if they're good for you on Wednesday when you have them first period. Come back and talk to me then. I don't know why teachers do that to each other. That's not helpful. But it's always those teachers who are trying to make a name for themselves. My friend and I would refer to those people as super teachers. Oh, there she goes. Super teacher. Anyway. So when I'm in a classroom, especially elementary or middle school, when the kids hear my accent, they'll say, "You have an accent." And I say, "Everyone has an accent." "Yeah, but you have an accent. Where are you from?" They'll ask where I'm from, and then when I say, "You're from England or you're from the UK," and then there's often, especially in the elementary, middle, people start trying to mimic the accent. I remember, I think I mentioned this before. There was one particular, I think it was third grade class. That class was crazy. They were all saying, "Can I bottle of water? Can I bottle of water?" That was their impression of a British person. How do you ask for water, miss? Can I bottle water? Can I bottle water? What are you doing? Get back on task. Well, this week there was a kid who he kept saying I was there a few days. He kept saying it because when he heard that I was British. And this is the phrase that he decided was the quintessential British phrase. Shut up, Gav. No, sorry. Shut up, brav. He kept saying that. Not to me, to his fellow students. Shut up, brav. I said at one point, I think by the third day, I was like, you do know that phrase that you're saying, the way you're saying it, is very specific to black males in South London. You do know that, right? That is not like the whole of England. Shut up, bruv. It's like, what are you watching on YouTube? It's so interesting. There was a kid in that class who's actually from England. He'd just come here a few years prior. He's from the UK, not from London. About an hour north, 2 hours north, in a little place that doesn't have much going on. Definitely has more going on than where I grew up in Middlesbrough, but yeah. Anyway, it's like a commuter town. I think a lot of people live there, but commute to London. But he's been there his whole life. He came to, I could hear his accent. He'd come to America like a few years ago. But he was Nigerian. I could see his name, and he was Nigerian. And for some reason, one day the kids were decided that they were going to. He was Yoruba, which is the tribe and the language of my husband. Also, the kids in the class, some boys sitting next to him, decided that they were going to look up Yoruba words and Google Translate and try to speak to him in Yoruba. It was a hot mess. They were typing in phrases and trying to say it to him in Yoruba. And he was just shaking his head. And they weren't embarrassing him. It wasn't like about let's embarrass him. He was just laughing. He was like, "You guys are crazy." It wasn't like making fun. It was like, "We're going to speak your language." "What is your language?" He told them. "We're going to speak your language." It was kind of cool, actually. But they were trying to do all these Yoruba phrases. And then at one point, he turned around and said to them, "You're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. You got to say it yelling and with your mouth wide open." And I understood exactly what he meant as somebody who's married to a Nigerian who speaks Yoruba and his family. He said to them that they're doing it wrong because when you're saying, you have to yell it. You have to have your mouth wide open. Anybody who's watched any Nollywood movies knows what I'm talking about. I just thought that was the funniest thing that he said. Then I started, of course, saying Yoruba phrases to him, yelling them with my mouth wide open. He was just laughing. He was like, "Yeah, exactly like that." Oh my goodness. I knew what he was talking about. I remember when my husband and I first got married. I remember I'd be in the bedroom with the baby. I would hear a kerfuffle in the living room and rush out. "What's wrong? What's wrong? Is everything okay?" They'd be like, my husband and his family would be like, "Nothing." "I thought you guys were arguing. What's going on?" "We're just talking." It took me a while to get used to the fact that for Yoruba people, Nigerians, yelling is talking. Interesting. Yelling is talking. So I have an update on baby daddy. I'd mentioned in a previous show that there was a 10th grader. I think he just turned 16. Who was bragging to the class about the 85% chance that the girl he was with is expecting his child. I'm like, first of all, why are you telling everyone? Like, where is this girl's privacy? It's crazy. And secondly, why are you telling everybody when it's 85% chance? That means there's a 15% chance this is not the case. But he was just so proud to tell everyone. So proud to tell everyone his mom was upset with him and everything. But it was like a joke to him, which, he's a 16-year-old boy. So most things are going to be a joke, even though they're serious. But the update is I saw him again at that school. He came in tardy, and I was like, "Oh, look, it's baby daddy." A girl in class said, even the substitute knows. That's how bad it is that he's telling everyone. He said, "Oh, that came back negative message." So I said, "Oh, Mazel tov, good, congratulations, good for you." He said, "Actually, I was upset." I said, "You were upset? I think you're good. I think you dodged a bullet. I don't think you need to be doing that right now at age 16, in 10th grade." I said, "Plus, remember you said you don't even have a job." He said, "Well, I got a job before because of that." And I was thinking, yeah, but what was the job though? Trust me, boy, you don't want to do that in 10th grade. Wait, even if you just wait a few years till you graduated from high school, you know. Yeah. So that's my update on baby daddy, and not baby daddy actually. Yeah. So I was offered a maternity leave position, 5th grade English language arts slash social studies. It would have been for 9 weeks, and I was really considering it. But I turned it down officially this week. I love the school, love who work, love the people who work there, love the kids. But I turned it down because I just feel like I'm really enjoying this substitute journey of getting up in the morning and thinking, where am I going today? And going to a new school and trying out elementary for the first time, trying middle school again for the first time in over a decade, and trying different subjects in high school. Like I said it before, it feels like you've been married for a long time and now you're single and you're dating around. You don't want to be tied down to one person who proposes like after 1 month. So I turned it down because I just didn't want to be tied down to one school for 9 weeks, and also turned it down because I've never taught that before. So that would be me reinventing the wheel for 9 weeks. That's a lot. And I'm sure maybe they would have had a good 5th grade team there who would have helped me. But still, I think if it had been something that I was more familiar with, like middle school or high school ELA, I think I would maybe be more open to it. But also, just the more I substitute, the more I realize that teaching hasn't got better. It's gotten worse in that there are even more requirements on teachers now than there were before. And the students' behavior has just changed drastically since COVID. And I don't see it. I haven't seen it bounce back. I see that it's still problematic. And I would have been responsible for lesson planning, grading, teaching, obviously, reaching out to parents, entering grades. And that is very different in elementary school than it is in high school, especially the grading and the progress monitoring. It's very different. And I don't know if I wanted to go through all of that just for 9 weeks. It would be different if it was a whole semester, but just for 9 weeks. So I was kind of sad that I had to turn it down, but I knew it was the best thing for me because I do enjoy visiting different schools, seeing different groups of students, seeing different teachers teach, being in different subjects, being in different grade levels. So I didn't think I wanted to be tied down for 9 weeks, especially because, as I said, teaching is so different now. So I see the stress on teachers when I go to schools, and I'm just like, I remember that stress. It seems cute when you're substituting. Sometimes it seems like a nice little fantasy, but the reality of teaching day to day is stressful, and it's hard, and it hasn't gotten easier. Seems like it's gotten worse. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of Education Today. We'll be back next time with more current topics on all things education. In the meantime, you can email any questions or comments you have about the show to edtodaypodcast@gmail.com. If you enjoy the show, please hit the subscribe button and consider leaving a review on whichever platform you are listening. We are listener supported, so if you are able to give a one-time or monthly donation, check out the show notes for ways in which you can give. Check out my blog for more about my experiences in education at medium.com/@SOCO. That's medium.com/@SOHKOR. You can also find me on Instagram at @SOCO_rights. That's at @SOHKOR_rights. See you next time, and thank you again for listening.